I stand here today
on an island in the middle of the mighty Mississippi,
clear-eyed about the fight ahead.
to declare
these words.
that
I am a candidate for president.
I'm running for president of the United States of America.
President of the United States.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi everyone, and welcome to another Woke Wednesday. This podcast was created to shed light on different societal issues which have been at the forefront of public discourse through one of the most divisive times in American history. More so, it was created with the intent of allowing those who have often been neglected, shunned, or misunderstood to have a chance to share their experiences and thoughts. I hope that this dialogue encourages critical conversation and activism amongst all listeners, and I hope you'll tell all your friends about it and share it on your social platforms. For the next few weeks, we are going to begin a series that focuses specifically on the 2020 presidential candidates. Each episode will detail the candidate's personal and political life, all with the hope of helping to inform our listeners and beyond on each of the candidates. By promoting insight into each of these people, our hope is that each voter is able to make educated, well-informed decisions on who they'll cast their ballot for in the next presidential election. I also want to encourage you to seek out other outlets like mine to have a wider grasp on who these individuals are and what they bring to the table for you and your loved ones. Because we all know that everyone has implicit biases, myself included. Each episode will, of course, highlight our own personal thoughts concerning the candidates, what the country needs moving forward, and how this person could potentially impact our society holistically. Lastly, I want to point out we've chosen to highlight each candidate in alphabetical order instead of choosing who may or may not be a favorite of our own, in order to remain conscious of how our own implicit bias can affect how the episodes are previewed. We also want to point out that while every presidential candidate running has different noteworthy platforms, we're only covering candidates with a somewhat plausible chance of winning the candidacy. Moreover, we also want to recognize that there are a multitude of candidates running for this position, which makes it impossible to allocate an episode to every candidate there is. If there is any candidate that you all feel strongly about that we don't make it to, please let us know by engaging with us on our Facebook or Instagram. We definitely love hearing feedback from our listeners. And lastly, we are starting a special vlog series via social media to update our listeners on current events and issues that are most pertinent to you all and to us. To be informed on when the vlogging will be posted, please follow us along on Facebook or our Instagram at Have a Woke Wednesday. With that, on this episode, we're going to focus on Beto O'Rourke, former Texas House member and El Paso City Council member.
Amy and I are happy to share with you that I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. This is a defining moment of truth for this country and for every single one of us. The challenges that we face right now, the interconnected crises in our economy, our democracy, and our climate have never been greater, and they will either consume us or they will afford us the greatest opportunity to unleash the genius of the United States of America. In other words, this moment of peril produces perhaps the greatest moment of promise for this country and for everyone inside of it. We can begin by fixing our democracy and ensuring that our government works for everyone and not just for corporations. We can invest in the dignity of those who work and those who seek to work. We can ensure that every single American can see a doctor and be well enough to live to their full potential. And all of us, wherever you live, can acknowledge that if immigration is a problem, it's the best possible problem for this country to have. And we should ensure that there are lawful paths to work, to be with family, and to flee persecution. We can listen to and lift up rural America. We can work on real justice reform and confront the hard truths of slavery and segregation in suppression in these United States of America. We can reassert our global leadership and end these decades-long wars and be there for every woman and man who has served in them. And perhaps most importantly of all, because our very existence depends on it, we can unleash the ingenuity and creativity of millions of Americans who want to ensure that we squarely confront the challenge of climate change before it's too late. This is going to be a positive campaign that seeks to bring out the very best from every single one of us, that seeks to unite a very divided country. We saw the power of this in Texas, where people allowed no difference, however great or however small, to stand between them and divide us, whether it was religion or gender or income or geography. We put our labels and our differences aside to come together for the only thing that matters: the future of this country and the generations that will follow us. Over the coming days, I'm going to travel this country and listen to those who I seek to serve, to understand from your perspective how we can best meet these challenges. On March 30th, I will be back here in El Paso, Texas, and I invite you to join us in a kickoff for this campaign. But even if you cannot be here on March 30th, I still want your help organizing where you live, bringing in friends and family and neighbors to the greatest grassroots campaign this country has ever seen. There's a lot more to come, but I want to leave you with this. The only way for us to live up to the promise of America is to give it our all and to give it for all of us. We are truly now, more than ever, the last great hope of Earth. At this moment of maximum peril and maximum potential, let's show ourselves and those who will succeed us in this great country just who we are and what we can do. Thank you.
He was born Robert Francis O'Rourke in El Paso, Texas, and was given the nickname of Beto as a young child from his father. His father was a politician, being that he served as Democratic County Commissioner and as a judge before switching political parties in an unsuccessful campaign run for Congress. His mom worked in their family furniture store. While his family held strong political ties and wealth, Beto's ambitions growing up absolutely wanted nothing to do with politics. He often accompanied his father on different political outings, but claimed he wanted nothing to do with that lifestyle, especially as a kid, because he felt awkward and was pretty shy. He wanted distance from his political father, so in high school, he transferred schools to an all-male boarding school in Virginia. When he graduated high school, he attended Columbia University, where he received his Bachelor's of Arts in English, much to his parents' dismay. He then worked in a publishing house and was also a member of a punk rock band called Foss. At his time in Columbia, he also interned in between for Texas Congressman Ron Coleman, which he says his father made him do. At Columbia, Beto became immersed with storytelling and was a lover of fiction. He was co-captain of the crew team and was known to get into trouble for skateboarding in the dorm hallways. His then-girlfriend talked at one point of how it always interested her how he was able to balance two very different social atmospheres so well, being that he was involved in this very intense sport, all while juggling his creative and artistic side. When he graduated from Columbia, he took on a live-in nanny position while working for his uncle's tech company and playing in his band. His friends, years later, described this period for him as a quarter-life crisis, and his father consistently told him that he always knew he had better things in store for his future. After moving back to El Paso a few years after graduation, O'Rourke co-founded a software and technology company called Stanton Technology Group, which his wife Amy now runs. He also began work in real estate and property investment. He met his now wife on a blind date while he was vying for his first shot at El Paso City Council, although she was supposed to be in town for a short time because she was applying for grad school. Clearly, her plans changed because the two wed 10 months later, and he won the city council seat. He served as a city council member from 2005 until 2011. As a city council member, O'Rourke represented a gerrymandered district comprised of predominantly poor Hispanic areas south of the wealthier white areas. His campaign was run on ending the council's corruption and making El Paso a great city. His wife, Amy, was the daughter of the richest developer in town that was the founder of a Paso del Norte group, a consortium that controlled the mostly white business class of the city and surrounding areas. He faced criticism when his father-in-law generated a development plan that would essentially create a new entertainment and retail space for the area. The parking lot would have been where the Border Farm Workers Clinic, a nonprofit that provides a cafeteria, clinic, and safe haven for migrant workers. Beto supported the plan by voting for it and continued to show backing for it despite the criticism he received from those he was representing and beyond. He even interviewed and said that the poor would be the most affected by it, but argued that the plan would infuse capital, jobs, and opportunity into a part of the world that needs it badly. Well, obviously, the poor would have been disproportionately affected by this development plan because it's a pure reflection of gentrification. The community was so enraged by the plan that they put together an ethics committee to research if Beto would have profited off the development plan. And although he was cleared of any wrongdoing in that regard, it still wasn't enough to remedy the relationship he'd broken with his community. So, he narrowly won re-election from his barrio in 2007. While the plan thankfully never passed, it damaged Beto's reputation with his community, whom many of them still haven't forgiven him for selling them out, essentially because of this obvious conflict of interest. Yet, this does truly exemplify how far the rich and powerful will go to ensure that they own more and more and are profiting off of every business venture possible. On a more positive note, O'Rourke worked to disband police unions, which put him at a huge odds with them and firefighters. He referred to them as being out of control and went on odds with his colleagues because they refused to stand up to this powerful political force because of their unwillingness to negotiate fairly for wages, all while the city manager was proposing a property tax increase, as well as increasing other taxes and fees in order to compensate these officers. While Beto was having this fight with these unions, he was annoying them as well by sponsoring the National Dialogue on Drug Legalization. He also got backlash from his colleagues for his support of LGBTQ rights. So, it does go to show that Beto does have some grit within himself to proactively seek change despite getting backlash from his constituents, all while supporting labor unions' active right to protest. Because even though he was on odds in this particular situation, he does holistically support the right to protest and unions doing it.
I do come from a family of veterans. And you know, you mentioned football season earlier. I kind of wanted to know how you personally felt about how disrespectful it is. Like you have the NFL players kneeling during the national anthems. I wanted to know if you found that disrespectful to our country, to our veterans, and anybody related to that. I find it incredibly frustrating that people seem to be okay with that. And I would just like to hear your input.
Thank you. Thanks for a great question. Again, on a really tough issue that if we don't talk about is not going to get better. And the question is, how do you feel about NFL players who take a knee during the national anthem? And is it disrespectful to this country, to the flag, to service members who are right there tonight, where it is tonight in Afghanistan, and those former service members, retirees, and veterans who are here with us today? Thank you each for your service. My short answer is no. I don't think it's disrespectful. Here's my longer answer, but I'm going to try to make sure that I get this right, because I think it's a really important question. And reasonable people can disagree on this issue. Let's begin there. And it makes them no less American to come down on a different conclusion on this issue, right? You can feel as a young man does, you can feel as I do, you're every bit as American, all the same. But I'm reminded, somebody mentioned reading the Taylor Branch book. You did. Parting the Waters and the King Years. And when you read that book and find out what Dr. King and this nonviolent, peaceful movement to secure better, because they didn't get full, civil rights for their fellow Americans, the challenges that they faced, those who died in Philadelphia, Mississippi, for the crime of trying to be a man, trying to be a woman in this country, the young girls who died in the church bombing, those who were beaten within an inch of their life crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama with John Lewis, those who were punched in the face, spat upon, dragged out by their collar at the Woolworth lunch counter for sitting with white people at the same lunch counter in the same country where their fathers may have bled the same blood on the battlefields of Omaha Beach or Okinawa or anywhere that anyone ever served this country. The freedoms that we have were purchased not just by those in uniform, and they definitely were, but also by those who took their lives into their hands riding those Greyhound buses, the Freedom Riders in the Deep South in the 1960s, who knew full well that they would be arrested, and they were serving time in the Mississippi State Penitentiary. Rosa Parks getting from the back of the bus to the front of the bus, peaceful, nonviolent protests, including taking a knee at a football game to point out that black men, unarmed, black teenagers, unarmed, and black children, unarmed, are being killed at a frightening level right now, including by members of law enforcement, without accountability and without justice. And this problem, as grave as it is not going to fix itself. And they're frustrated, frankly, with people like me and those in positions of public trust and power who have been unable to resolve this or bring justice for what has been done and to stop it from continuing to happen in this country. And so nonviolently, peacefully, while the eyes of this country are watching these games, they take a knee to bring our attention and our focus to this problem to ensure that we fix it. That is why they are doing it, and I can think of nothing more American than to peacefully stand up or take a knee for your rights anytime, anywhere, any place. So thank you very much for asking the question. I appreciate it.
Following his time as city council member, O'Rourke decided to take his first shot at Congress by striving to unseat an eighth-term incumbent, Sylvester Reyes, which he did by running a campaign on cannabis legalization and the use of campaign funds. Interestingly enough, he received support from a Republican oil man that ran a super PAC that his father-in-law also donated to. He's now obviously backtracked, being that during his Senate campaign, he committed to refraining from accepting any donations from super PACs and being grassroots organized. But as a House member, O'Rourke has voted for GOP bills that Democrats believe reinforce Republicans' anti-tax ideology, took away from the Affordable Care Act, decreased Wall Street regulations, and boosted the fossil fuel industry. Consumer, environmental, public health, and civil rights groups have passed legislation that was backed by Beto that aids big banks, undermines the fight against climate change, and backs Trump's anti-immigration agenda. Again, this is a stark contrast to his failed Senate run against Ted Cruz, where he vehemently opposed all legislation that didn't support major climate change initiatives, wanting nothing to do with big corporations, and having a campaign that he claimed as being for all of the people. After serving in the House for 3 years, Beto took his shot at unseating Republican Ted Cruz for his Senate seat, which became one of the country's highly watched races in the midterm elections. This propelled him onto the national stage, with several viral videos depicting him in town halls defending Colin Kaepernick's right to kneel during the national anthem circulating around the web. He drastically out-fundraised Cruz by raising almost $70 million in the race overall. His enthusiastic nature and willingness to venture to all 254 Texas counties, no matter how deeply red they were, really struck with all, and not just the Texas voters, but the nation as well. While he only lost the race by a very narrow 2.6% margin, voters in Texas and all around the world were highly engaged with his campaign run, and the question of, will he run for president, began, which he did. Beto announced his candidacy for president through a Vanity Fair article declaring, "I was born to be in it." This sentiment was met with mixed reception out of the gate, alongside an announcement video featuring his wife in silence next to him. That won't be me when I run for president. I'm just saying. Now, as a 2020 presidential nominee, Beto took to the road with a high-energy campaign by hosting town halls, meeting with voters, and having lots and lots of rallies. He's running his campaign very similarly to his Senate one, with a grassroots outlook, and is currently being courted by Wall Street donors alongside Pete, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Kirsten Gillibrand. He's a longtime NAFTA supporter and a supporter of immigration reform. He wants to aggressively enforce executive power by not only protecting recipients of DACA, but their parents as well from deportation. He's tried to fight his fossil fuel allegiances by becoming one of the first candidates to release a robust climate change initiative that would call for a $5 trillion investment and tightening ways on existing laws to control/cut carbon emissions. He also recently unveiled a veterans plan as alongside a war tax for non-military household, which has received mixed reviews, being that we already spend billions of dollars in defense, so I'm not for this. Sorry. We already spend an extraordinary amount of money on our military and in defense. So sorry, this ain't it, Beto. No, thank you. While Beto truly captured the attention of myself, alongside many other Americans in his Senate campaign, and I got to personally attend one of his rallies, which was very insightful to say the least. He definitely faltered in this presidential race, being that he's remained in the middle of Democratic contenders in the polls, and he didn't meet expectations by any means in his first Democratic debate. It's truly being exemplified that although his campaign for Senate was motivating for many, it's not all the same in an election this massive, especially because these contenders are vying to unseat Trump. In order to rejuvenate his campaign and bring voters in, he needs to be clearer in his plans for policy change, as well as humble enough to admit his inexperience in some regards to how this campaign should be run. Sorry, I need him to hire someone, because that first Democratic debate, a miss. I've also personally seen, specifically from minority voices, that as a white, heterosexual, cisgender male, in order for Beto to engage with people of color, his ambiguous plans and failure at being prepared during the debate will not go over well for him if he truly wants to win their vote.
If I could, I'm sorry. Congresista O'Rourke, ¿qué haría usted en el primer día, si usted es presidente, sobre esta realidad que está ocurriendo? What would you do, Congressman, day one at the White House?
Vamos a tratar cada persona con el respeto y dignidad que merecen como humanos. We would not turn back Valeria and her father, Oscar. We would accept them into this country and follow our own asylum laws. We would not build walls. We would not put kids in cages. In fact, we would spare no expense to reunite the families that have been separated already. And we would not criminally prosecute any family who is fleeing violence and persecution. We would make sure...
Secretary, let him finish, and I will give you... But let him finish, please. Yes.
We would not detain any family fleeing violence, in fact, fleeing the deadliest countries on the face of the planet today. We would implement a family case management program so they could be cared for in the community at a fraction of the cost. And then we would rewrite our immigration laws in our own image. Free dreamers forever from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in this country. Invest in solutions in Central America, work with regional stakeholders so there's no reason to make that 2,000-mile journey to this country.
Secretary, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Let's be very clear. The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Beto. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you truly want to change the system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country.
I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants, right? And you said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325 was because you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking. But let me tell you what, Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Title 21 and Title 22 already cover human trafficking and drug trafficking. I think that you should do your homework on this issue. If you did your homework on this issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
This is an issue that we should and could be talking about for a long time, and we will for a long time.
Can we talk about the conditions as to why people are coming here?
Let's let Lester.
Because
Savannah. I know it's just we could go on.
But rather than talk about specific provisions, we really have to talk about why these people are coming to our country and what are we going to do to actually make a difference in these countries.
Now, while I've been sharing my personal thoughts on Beto and his campaign thus far, I want to move into sharing our producer Trey's thoughts. Beto has emerged as a true leader of this new wave of Democrats following his 2018 Senate campaign. His haphazard entry into the 2020 race has put him farther behind top-tier contenders, with some early comments not doing him any favors. Many hoped that he would run for the other Texas Senate seat in 2020, with many questioning why Beto was the star presidential candidate to emerge from the South, being that Stacey Abrams almost defeated Brian Kemp in Georgia by an even slimmer margin. Regardless, his energy and passion is consistently on full display, traveling the entire country and relying on more intimate town hall interactions to propel his campaign forward rather than participating in more conventional campaign methods, such as talk shows and national press junkets. His lack of a conventional campaign manager was on full display during the first round of the presidential debates, relying primarily on personal anecdotes and appeals to pathos rather than concrete ideas or policy propositions. It seems as if Beto's own integrity and steadfastness as a campaigner has alienated himself from Main Street Democrats, and what attracted so many to his brand and identity as a leader has not been enough to combat the slew of other candidates who are continuing to make waves in a more saturated, conventional way. He needs to change something about his approach to this campaign, or risk failing out of the race completely. Regardless, Beto still has an effervescent form of compassion that displays during every town halls and speeches that he's bound to continue making waves as a leader in this party. I hope this episode was informative and thought-provoking for all that listened and for those that will listen in the future. I hope that Beto's presidential campaign is able to somehow turn it around in order to put himself in a somewhat more favorable chance in winning the nomination. While his Senate race definitely captured the hearts of many, we should also recognize the gravity of running for the most highly coveted seat in our country, and remember that as we take our ballots to the voting box. Remember, all of these opinions are my own, but they should be everyone else's. Have a woke Wednesday. Thank you for another Woke Wednesday. Transcripts of entire episodes will be available on the Woke Wednesday website. Episodes are written and produced by Hannah Mason and Trey Leonard of Lenico Entertainment. Episodes are hosted by Hannah Mason and edited by Trey Leonard. All graphics are designed by Anna French,